What kind of man risks his life for a stranger, knowing it might bring death to his door before sunrise? That was the question Tobias Hartwell would be forced to answer long before the next day was through. The blood trail reached his well like a map written by fear. Tobias had seen wounded deer, coyotes, and cattle across his land, but this blood was different. It was heavier, darker, soaked deep into the dirt. As he stepped around the barn and saw the young Indian warrior lying there, his breath caught in his throat. The man was barely conscious, one hand clutching a bullet wound in his side, while the other reached for the bucket of water hanging just out of reach. Tobias raised his rifle out of instinct. This was the frontier after all. In 1847, fear ruled more than any law. Neighbors would tell him he had two choices: shoot the Indian now, or risk waking up to his house burned down by an entire tribe. But when the warrior whispered the word water, the fear in Tobias's chest cracked. Humans did not cry out for blood when they were dying. They cried out for life. He lowered the rifle. Tobias brought the bucket down and held it to the young man's lips. The warrior drank fast, desperate, swallowing like every drop was borrowed time. 3 full buckets later, he finally steadied. Then Tobias saw it. The wound wasn't from an animal. It was a bullet hole. Fresh, close range. Someone had wanted this man dead and had tried hard to make sure it happened. Before Tobias could think what that meant, the Indian raised a shaking hand and pointed toward the horizon. Then he dragged his finger across his throat. Danger, coming fast. Tobias's pulse jumped. Whoever shot this man might be following the blood trail right now. They might already be near the barn. The warrior tried to sit up and failed. Blood spread across his shirt again. Moving him would kill him. Leaving him in the open would do the same. Then Tobias heard hoofbeats. Not 1 horse. Not 2. At least 6. Riding hard. He grabbed the bucket and splashed dirt over the blood trail, but he was too late. The riders were already at the ridge. Sunlight hit their rifles, and Tobias knew exactly who they were. Marshal Dixon Webb, the most feared lawman in 3 territories. Webb rode closer, his eyes sharp as broken glass. He dismounted and scanned the ranch with that cold, calculating stare that had made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit. His 5 deputies spread in a half-circle around Tobias, each gripping a weapon. Tobias Hartwell, Webb said, stepping forward, "We're tracking a wounded Indian. Blood trail comes straight to your place." Tobias felt his throat go dry. "Haven't seen any Indians. Been fixing the south fence all day." Webb's gaze dropped to the blood-soaked dirt near the well. He raised one eyebrow. "That's so?" Behind Tobias, just inches away, the wounded warrior lay motionless. If Webb stepped 3 paces forward, the truth would explode like dynamite. Webb rested his hand on his pistol, the leather creaking under his fingers. "You know the penalty for hiding an Indian fugitive?" Tobias didn't answer. Webb did. "Hanging." The word cut through the air like a knife. Everything was about to break open when the wounded Indian suddenly spoke. Not in English, not quietly. His voice rose strong, clear, full of a power Tobias didn't understand. The language was Apache. And when those words reached Webb's ears, the marshal stopped, like someone had turned him to stone. His face turned pale. His hand fell from his pistol. "You're him," Webb whispered. "Dear God, you're him." The deputies looked confused, shifting uneasily. Webb swallowed hard, sweat forming on his temple. The Indian pushed himself straighter, wincing, but holding Webb's gaze. When he spoke again, this time in perfect English, the entire ranch seemed to hold its breath. "My name is Ayana, son of Chief Takakota, keeper of the peace treaty." Tobias felt the world tilt under his boots. He had given water to the man responsible for stopping 3 years of bloodshed between settlers and tribes. If this man died, the entire territory would drown in war again. Ayana's next words chilled everyone. "Someone tried to kill me during a meeting with Colonel Morrison, someone who wants the treaty destroyed." Webb's jaw tightened, but there was fear now, real fear. Ayana reached into a small pouch at his belt and pulled out a blood-stained letter. "Colonel Morrison wrote this before he died. He named the real traitors. Tobias saw Webb's breath hitch. Ayanna continued, voice steady. Morrison discovered who was selling weapons to the renegade tribes, who profited from war, who staged his murder to frame me. The deputies shifted again, eyes darting between their marshal and the wounded Apache. Even they could smell the truth now. "You're lying," Webb snarled, but his voice cracked. Ayanna looked him dead in the eyes. "Then why do you fear what's in this letter?" Before Webb could answer, Deputy Bradley spoke up. "Marshal, I saw those missing rifles in Settlers' hands last month. This don't add up." Webb spun toward him. "Quiet, boy!" But it was too late. Doubt was spreading, cracks forming, and once a crack appeared in a corrupt man's armor, it only grew wider. Ayanna closed his eyes briefly, then lifted his head and began to sing, a low, ancient song that carried across the land like wind over canyon stone. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Every deputy paused. Even Webb didn't move, but Tobias felt something else. A vibration in the earth. Faint, growing stronger. Hoofbeats. Not 6 riders this time. Dozens. Tobias's breath caught. Ayanna wasn't just singing. He was calling to his people. Webb realized it at the same moment. Terror flashed in his eyes. "How many?" he whispered. Ayanna opened his eyes and answered with a calm that made Tobias's skin prickle. "Enough." And the thunder of hundreds of hooves rolled toward the ranch like a storm no one could outrun. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder with each passing second. The ground trembled, like the earth itself knew something powerful was coming. Tobias felt the air shift around him, heavy with fear and something else he couldn't name. His heart pounded so hard he thought Webb might hear it. Marshal Webb's hand tightened on his pistol. His eyes darted from the ridge to Ayanna, then to his own deputies. Panic spread across his face like wildfire. He had faced gangs, outlaws, and armed settlers, but this was different. This was a whole nation riding toward him. Ayanna stood with effort, leaning against the well. His wound still bled, but his posture was strong. Tobias watched him carefully. There was no fear in his eyes, only certainty. "They come because they know I am alive," Ayanna said. "They come because my father rides with them." Webb paled. "Your father? Chief Takakota?" Ayanna nodded once. The rumble of horses grew louder, rolling like thunder across the plains. Tobias stepped back, unsure what would happen next. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a lawman. He was just a rancher, caught in the middle of something far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Deputy Bradley swallowed hard. "Marshal, maybe we should lower our weapons." "We do that," Webb growled, "and we lose control." "You don't have control now," Tobias said, surprising himself with his own voice. "Not with what's coming." Webb swung his pistol toward Tobias, eyes wild. "You shut your mouth." Ayanna spoke sharply. "Point that gun at him again and you'll answer to every warrior riding this way." Webb hesitated. His hand shook. For a moment, he looked like a man trying to hold water in his fists. Everything slipping, everything falling apart. Then the riders appeared. They came over the ridge like a wave of color and dust. More than Tobias could count. At least 50, maybe more. They rode in perfect formation, horses steady, faces set with purpose. Their paint shone bright in the sun, their spears and bows carried with respect, not rage. At their head rode an older man. His hair was long and silver, braided with eagle feathers. His presence was so strong it made Tobias step back without even thinking. Chief Takakota. The entire valley seemed to go quiet when he reached the ranch. Even the horses slowed to a steady walk, their hooves thudding gently against the dirt. Webb gulped like a man facing judgment. The chief dismounted without a word, his eyes fixed on Ayanna. He walked straight to his son and placed both hands on his shoulders. His voice shook as he spoke in Apache. Ayanna answered softly. Tobias couldn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. Love, fear, relief. The other warriors waited in respectful silence. Not one raised a weapon. After checking Ayana's wound, the chief turned slowly to face Marshal Webb. His eyes were sharp and cold. "My son tells me you came to kill him," the chief said in perfect English. Webb straightened, though fear clung to him like dust. "He is wanted for murder." "Murder he did not commit," the chief answered. "We already know the truth." He signaled to one of his men, who stepped forward holding a leather satchel. The chief pulled out several folded papers and handed them to Bradley. Bradley opened them, eyes widening. "Marshal, these are letters with your signature. Deals with gun smugglers, shipments, payments." Webb's face drained of color. "Those are lies." "They are truth," the chief said. "Your own handwriting speaks louder than your denial." Deputy Hawkins tried to ride off, but 3 warriors moved their horses and blocked him. Sweat trickled down his face. Bradley turned toward Tobias. "These papers, they show who's been selling rifles to the renegade tribes, the same rifles we were told they stole." "And you knew," Tobias said quietly. "You let the killings go on." Webb snapped. "I did what I had to." "You don't understand this land. War makes money. War keeps order. Peace makes people forget who's in charge." Ayana stepped forward, leaning on the well. "Peace saves lives. That is why they tried to kill me." Webb's jaw tightened. Rage replaced fear. With a snarl, he ripped his pistol free and pointed it straight at the chief. "If I'm going down, I'm taking him with me." Ayana shouted a warning. The deputies drew their guns. The warriors reached for their weapons. And Tobias didn't think. He moved. He threw himself at Webb from the side, slamming into him with all his strength. The pistol fired into the sky. Webb hit the dirt hard, Tobias on top of him. The gun skittered away. Deputy Bradley and 2 others rushed forward, wrenching Webb's arms behind his back and forcing him to his knees. Hawkins tried to run, but was caught by 2 warriors and dragged back. The danger passed, but the fear took longer to fade. The chief approached Tobias slowly. His face held no anger, only deep respect. "You," the chief said, placing a hand on Tobias's shoulder, "saved my son when others would have let him die. You stood between him and death again just now. For this you are honored." Ayana stepped beside his father. "You are a brother now." Tobias felt something strange rise in his chest, a warmth he had never known, acceptance, respect, the beginning of something new. The warriors formed a circle, touching Tobias's hand one by one. Each gesture was soft, steady, sincere. When the last man stepped back, the chief lifted a war lance decorated with feathers and beadwork. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said. "It is a symbol of honor. Today we share that honor with you." Tobias held the lance with shaking hands. The chief nodded once. "Tomorrow we ride to bring the truth to the council. Justice will be served." Quote. Tobias looked around the ranch, the deputies, the captured lawmen, the gathered warriors. Everything had changed, and the worst was not over yet. The morning sun rose over the valley like a slow-burning fire. Tobias stood outside his barn, holding the war lance the chief had given him. The weight of it felt strange in his hands, not heavy, but meaningful. It was more than a symbol. It was a promise, a responsibility, and somehow it already felt like a part of him. Ayana stood nearby, his wound freshly bandaged by the tribe's medicine man. He was weak but steady. His dark eyes held calm strength, strength that had almost been silenced forever. Today, everything would be decided. The Apache warriors prepared their horses with quiet focus. Their movements were smooth, coordinated, like they all shared the same heartbeat. The air felt thick with expectation. No one spoke unless needed. Deputy Bradley approached Tobias, adjusting his badge, the medal catching the morning light. He looked younger in the daylight, less worn, more determined. "Council's expecting us," Bradley said. "If we show Morrison's letter and these papers, the truth will come out." "And Webb?" Tobias asked. Bradley looked over his shoulder. Webb and Hawkins were tied to a post near the barn, guarded by 2 warriors. Webb stared at the ground, the fire gone from his eyes, replaced by something like resignation. "We'll bring him," Bradley said. "Let him face what he built." Ayana walked up to Tobias. "You ride with us," he said. Tobias blinked. Me? You know the truth. You saw what he tried to do. Your voice matters. Tobias wasn't sure. He was a rancher, not a witness in government affairs. But when he looked at Ayanna, he understood. This wasn't only about law. This was about honor, peace, and the fragile line between two worlds. "I'll ride," Tobias said. Ayanna gave a small nod. "Good." The warriors helped Ayanna mount his horse. It took effort, but he never showed pain. The chief rode beside him, silent and steady. Bradley and the deputies prepared their own mounts, with Webb and Hawkins tied to separate horses. Tobias climbed onto his mare, gripping the war lance across his saddle. The leather felt smooth under his hands. The horse shifted restlessly, sensing the tension in the air. The chief raised his hand. The riders began their journey. The group moved across the plains like a river of color and purpose. Dust rose behind them, carried by the wind. The land stretched wide and empty in every direction, but Tobias felt far from alone. The warriors rode close, their presence fierce, yet comforting. Ayanna stayed near Tobias, his posture straight. Despite the pain Tobias knew he felt. "My people ride not only for justice," he said, "but to show the council that peace is worth saving." Tobias nodded. "You're right." "You helped make this possible," Ayanna said. "Never forget that." Hours passed as the riders crossed the valley and climbed toward the council lands. The sun rose higher, burning away the morning chill. When they finally reached the meeting ground, Tobias felt his breath catch. The Apache council had already gathered. Dozens of elders sat in a wide circle, their expressions serious. Behind them, warriors stood like silent shadows. The atmosphere was heavy, thick with anticipation. The chief and Ayanna rode forward. The council parted to let them through. Tobias and the deputies followed, bringing Webb and Hawkins behind them. Ayanna dismounted with help, then stood tall before the council. "My father," he began, "I bring truth." One of the elders gestured. "Speak!" Ayanna reached for the blood-stained letter. Bradley handed him the paperwork discovered in Webb's satchel. Ayanna placed everything at the center of the council circle. He spoke with steady calm. The ambush, the gun shipments, the false accusations, the murder of Colonel Morrison, Webb's corruption, the plot to end the peace. Every word carried weight. When Ayanna finished, silence hung heavy in the air. The chief stepped forward. "We already knew parts of this. Today, we know the whole." He turned to Bradley. "You confirm this?" Quote. Bradley nodded. "Yes, sir. These are Webb's letters. His agreements with smugglers. His orders. His handwriting." Another elder asked, "And this man?" He pointed to Tobias. "Why is he here?" Ayanna answered, "Because he saved my life. Because he stood between me and death. Because his courage proves peace can live between our peoples." The elders murmured. Some nodded. Some looked unsure. Old wounds ran deep. Then the chief raised his hand. "Let us judge the guilty first." Webb and Hawkins were dragged forward. Hawkins trembled. Webb clenched his jaw but said nothing. The chief held up Morrison's letter. "This tells the truth. This exposes your crimes." Hawkins broke first. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. We were just following orders." Webb snarled at him. "Coward!" The chief silenced them. "Your punishment will be decided by both nations. Justice will be shared." His eyes turned to Tobias. "Step forward." Tobias dismounted slowly, feeling every eye on him. He stood before the elders, hands stiff at his sides. The chief's voice softened. "You acted with honor. You protected life. You risked your own for truth." Quote. Ayanna added, "Without him, I would be dead, and the peace would die with me." The oldest elder rose to his feet. His voice was deep and steady. "Then he is no longer only a rancher. Today, he is brother." He placed his hand on Tobias's shoulder. The circle of elders echoed his words. "Brother." The warriors around them struck their spears against the ground in approval. Tobias felt something warm rise inside him, a feeling like purpose, belonging, and respect all at once. Ayanna stepped toward him. "You saved much more than one life." Tobias looked at the faces around him, the tribe, the council, Ayana, people he would have once feared. Now they felt like something closer to family. When the council meeting ended, judgment was passed. Webb and Hawkins would stand trial with both Apache and government witnesses. Morrison's letter would be delivered to the governor. The gun-running operation would be exposed. Peace would hold. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land, Ayana turned to Tobias one last time. "We leave at sunrise, but our bond stays." Quote. Tobias gripped the war lance. "Always." The chief smiled. Then today, the plains gained a new kind of warrior. And with the soft wind of the evening brushing across the valley, Tobias knew his life had changed forever. Not because he gave water to a stranger, but because he chose compassion when everyone else chose fear. Sometimes, the smallest act reshapes the entire world. Sometimes, the world is saved by one simple choice.